Excellent!
At last, the build continues. I had to put this off for a couple weeks because I was working on building a computer in a pumpkin, and that actually went pretty well. Check out the video on that if you're interested. But getting back to this epic water-cooled system featuring the Singularity Computer's Spectre 2.0 case, as well as an AMD Ryzen 3900X for now, the MSI Godlike X570 motherboard, and two RTX 2080 Ti's in NVLink SLI, and these are the MSI Seahawk EK versions of those cards. And I've already done a couple videos on this build, and I'm going to keep doing videos on it until it's finished, so you're going to be able to see each individual step. We found out, for example, in the first video that these graphics cards are so large and so tall when it comes to this upper part here that it actually conflicts with the distribution plates that Singularity included. They included the front distribution plate for this, as well as a side distribution plate. In the second video, we set up some testing for the core components of the build, and we discovered that one of the two RTX 2080 Ti Seahawk EK graphics cards from MSI was unfortunately defective. In my Pumpkin PC build video, I actually went and returned one of those, got it replaced, so we have a backup for that here. So today I have some hopefully achievable plans in mind for what we can get done, starting with an introduction of a few more of the water cooling components. From Hardware Labs, we have these Black Ice Nemesis GTR 360mm, 60mm thick, actually about 55mm thick radiators. These are really nice, so I want to install these and make sure that they're fitting up properly. And then of course we gotta blow air through the radiators. For those, I have the Noctua Chromax NFF12 all black fans. These actually are Chromax, so they come with the colored nibs that you can put on the corners, but I'm gonna go with all black to keep things a little bit more subtle with this build. So I'd like to do another test loop setup, integrating the rest of this hardware into the system, integrating the front distribution plate as well as the rear distribution plate here. We're gonna remove this side distribution plate because it just probably isn't gonna fit with this build. I can then get another test loop set up, although it's gonna be a bit more of a graduated test loop. I'm gonna just use soft tubing to get things routed where they need to go so I can make sure that there's no leaks in any of the distribution plates. If that works, then I will have what is essentially a functional loop set up in the system, but it's gonna be super temporary yet again with the soft tubing because I'm eventually gonna be switching to hardline tubing. Beyond that, other decisions that need to be made are what am I gonna be using for the memory actually, because I haven't decided on that kit. The power supply I need to figure out as well. I have a Cooler Master unit here, but I might be switching that out. I have confirmed that my cable sleeving is gonna be done by Ensourced Customs, so I'm gonna need to take some measurements for that so that those cables can start to be made. If I can get all that figured out, then we can move on to the final phases of this build in the next video, which is going to be the hardline water cooling setup. And for that, I actually also have some ideas for what fittings I should use. So there is much to be done, but I think we can make a lot of progress today, starting with a closer look at these rads. Here's a quick glance at the box for the Black Ice Nemesis GTR 360. It says it's optimized for 1000 RPM fans, but if you look at most forums online, they actually perform really well when you go for higher RPMs. I'm gonna see how they work with the Noctua NFF12s. 16 FPI 25 micron 4th generation radical geometry copper fins. Standard G1/4 fittings, and you actually see the layout of the radiator itself right here. Now for the Spectre 2.0, it can actually handle radiators up to 60mm thick. Although you can only do one set of fans if you're going with thicker radiators. Because I'm using really high quality fans, I'm confident that just a single set of fans on one side of these in push is going to be okay. And here we can see the actual width is 54mm. The radiators themselves, you can just tell, are very well put together, very substantial. I like the nice sort of matte black finish that they have on them. Of course, we got standard G1/4 fittings here on the end. And you can tell why when Corsair was parting out their Hydro X line, they went with Hardware Labs as the OEM for their radiators because they're very well respected in the industry. And you can also see, I guess you can sort of get a look at the fin density there, depending on whether I have it lined up well enough. Sure, that looks fine, right? But one key thing you should do if you're setting up an open loop or a custom loop, once you get your radiators, is make sure you flush them. There can often be little bits of metal or other elements from the manufacturing process that can get caught up inside. You do not want those to flush into your loop and potentially clog your blocks up. So that's one of the tasks we have on hand today, is to give both of these a good flush. One last thing to mention about these radiators is that they do include a few sets of screws, and they're very particular about you using the screws that it comes with to make sure that you're hitting the right depth, and in particular not going too far down because you don't want to punch any holes in the actual fluid channels of the radiator. And also, they're directional. That's also something that you don't see quite as commonly with radiators. You can use these in either direction, but they're just saying for optimal usage, for the best cooling performance, depending on the direction of the airflow, you want to use either port A as the in and port B as the out, or if you're flowing the air in the other direction, you want to switch those. So if you aren't familiar with Noctua's Chromax stuff, after being berated by the general public for the color scheme that Noctua is notorious for using for many, many years, they finally came out with the Chromax versions of some of their popular fans. The NF-F12 was their most popular fan, particularly for PWM situations where static pressure is important. For a very long time, it is only really surpassed at this point by Noctua's newest version. Of course, Noctua now has these, the NF-A12X25s, which are arguably better. These are available in a few different variations, like this is the Flex version here, which is 3-pin, for example. And they are making these in black as well, but currently only selling them along with the new all-black air coolers that they have made. Long story short, I just decided to go with the old school NF-F12. It is Chromax, and it comes with this little kit of accessories, which is basically some mounting screws, and then different colored corner pads so you can color code and match up with the rest of your system. And a thought occurs to me as I'm mounting some of these little corner pads for the first time, which is that Noctua gives you 4 of each in each color, which means I'm going to be able to put these, for example, because since they're anti-vibration, they're rubber pads, I'll be able to put these on the side that's going to go up against the radiator. But then if you flip it around, you're still going to have these garish uncovered corners on the other side that's more visible. Granted, I'd rather have the functional improvement of the rubber pads on one side, but maybe I should get more of these. And the other nice thing actually about these fans is look how short the plug is. And you might look at that and think like, wow, that's too short. I'd rather not have it that short. Well, it comes with this, an extension here. But that basically means you have the option to unplug it there if you wanted to replace this cable, or if you want to do a sleeved one, or you want to do a custom length one. And that's actually pretty convenient too, especially for a build like this, where all of the cabling is going to be very visible no matter what I do. There are various ways to flush your radiator. This is the most effective means I've come up with doing it here in my kitchen. I'm just running water out of the tap. I've got a couple of hoses attached up, and I've got the lower hose to drain down into the sink. Just running tap water through it, like a decent amount, shaking up the radiator a little bit here and there to try to dislodge anything that might get caught up in there. Then once I've done this for about 5 to 10 minutes per rad, I will switch over to distilled water, do just a quick flush with that, and then should be good to install in the system. What could go wrong? If you need a third hand, you just use your mouth to hold things. I drooled on it a little bit. It's okay. Wouldn't be the first time. So I managed to remove both of the distribution plates. This is the side one that we are not going to use. I think I'm going to keep it around. We'll see if I can repurpose it at some point. The front one we can use. And I actually first saw distribution plates like this, first made in builds that 8-pack was doing back in the day. But all you really need is some high quality acrylic and a CNC machine to mill it out, and then a bunch of tiny screws to make sure that you have equal pressure going around everywhere where the fluid channel is going to be. And one of the things that Singularity has been working with to make sure is ideal is to make sure that when they're putting these screws in, they're not over tightening them. And that is why in the first video you might have seen that one of the screws that was mounting the top of this distribution plate was missing its nut. It had sort of rattled off during shipping. They said that they're going to be addressing that and that they're continuously trying to refine their methodology for that, because acrylic, if you over tighten, it's going to crack. If you under tighten, it won't be tight enough. Here they want the perfect amount of tightness, and I, for my part, just needed to remove this front plate because it blocks the mount for the radiator itself. So we're just really trying to mount the radiator here. In case you're wondering, this specific one just has an inlet and an outlet. The water goes in and goes out down the sides and then back up the middle. There is zero purpose for this distribution plate other than looking pretty, being cool, being another area to route your fluid. Functionally, it's not going to improve anything when it comes to the performance of the system, but there's lots of stuff in this build that is just there for looks, so why not this too? So speaking of the sort of practical impracticality of this front distribution plates, since I have two connection points up here at the top, and those are both going to be like right here, and I've got both of the radiators installed, and as you can see, suddenly there's a lot less room up in here, especially right in this corner. So the way the flow is going to go is it's going to come out of this one and probably go over and into this radiator here, and then normally it would come out of that radiator and go back into the top of the loop right there, but it's probably going to need to come out of this, do some 90-degree turn with some strange combination of fittings to get right up into this area to go in and out of the front distribution loop, and then same thing with a few more fittings to get back to this point. Now, because my plan right now is to set up the loop in here but not do a final version, I'm just going to do some soft tubing so I can run the loop and get some initial tests and figure out where I want to go from there with the hardline tubing. I'm using some of the Alpha Cool soft tube fittings that I used on Riptide originally. I have a fair amount of extra, fortunately. So for my initial testing, I think I'm just going to not integrate this front distribution plate. I can connect that up to a loop separately so I can leak test it on its own, but that will keep things much simpler, so I can just use those Alpha Cool fittings and some soft tubing to come out of here to go over into the GPUs, and then out of the GPUs and then up into the top radiator. Because another thing I'm not going to be doing right now is water cooling the CPU yet. I'm just going to leave the air cooler on there. Again, this is just an in-between testing video to get most of the water cooling stuff in place and then get a much better idea of what we're going to do for moving forward with the hardline loop. And I suppose if there is a lesson to be learned here, it's that if you want a little bit more space to work with, in this case, probably don't want to go with the maximum thickness radiators, since these are about 55 millimeters thick. They say they can do up to 60, but even here, we're already sort of almost to the point where we might conflict with these top inlets and outlets. So I'd recommend possibly just slightly thinner radiators. That said, I really like these rads, and I think they're pretty thick, and it's a challenge, so we're going to go ahead and try to keep using them. We've made our first connection between the case and the radiator. It's right up here. I'm using a dual 45, a dual 45, a single 45 rotary, a female extender, a male to male, and a single inline extender there, and somehow it all worked out and they fit. This is not permanent, by the way. It's just a unique little combination of fittings that actually got the job done, and I don't have to try to wedge in some soft tubing in there. Well, all right, guys, what you're seeing here in front of you is the finished build. Everything's complete, it's put together, it's exactly as I was hoping it would be, and I hope you're happy with the finished product. No, I'm kidding, of course. What you're seeing here is the end result of me with my requirement of doing a single day at a time to work on this build and to get to a certain point where I've aimed at, which was to fill the loop. In order to do that today, I had to skip a few things. For instance, minor details like installing the motherboard, which is still over here. Fortunately, we already know the motherboard works, so that's good. Our main accomplishments today are going to boil down to getting a much better idea of the radiator sizing and fitting and spacing, getting a much better idea of what's going to be required to go and integrate the front panel distribution plate right there. Once again, lining this up without the side distribution plate, which gets us a little bit better look at where the cabling is going to come over to get to the graphics cards, as well as coming out over here to get to the motherboard. I've been talking with Joey from InSource Customs a little bit about the cabling, the sleeving for this build, and we're still sort of of in the works in that. So I think I'm gonna put a pin in that for now. And if you guys have any suggestions when it comes to the sleeving in particular, as far as color scheme or anything like that, please leave those in the comment section down below. For now, since we do have a completed loop from the pump down there up here to this outlet, which loops around here and goes into both of our graphics cards, then goes, it would go from there to the CPU, and then from the CPU up to this top radiator, from the top radiator to the back distribution plate back there, across this channel to this out, which goes into the front radiator. Then there's another outlet from that goes back into the reservoir area, and the loop continues. Well, all right, guys, this is how far we have gotten today. I'm just turning the pump back on. It is working, it is cycling. Never mind this area up here in the upper left where I'm holding paper towels, where there is a little bit of a leak. That's not the point. The point is that everywhere else that's not leaking is not leaking, right? That's the important thing. So if it wasn't already obvious to you guys, my plan for this build is to work on it a day at a time, show you guys the work that I get done that day, warts and all, whatever goes right, whatever goes wrong, that's the deal. So if you're watching this video 3 on this build and you're thinking, wow, lots of things going wrong, because in video 1, we had a conflict with the distro plate, video 2, we had a failed graphics card, video 3, we have a mostly functional loop now, but just a little bit of a leak at the top. I'm gonna count this as a win, actually, because the leak's happening on that really weird connection of multiple fittings that I put together just to sort of bridge that gap there. It's not permanent, it's gonna be taken apart. Everywhere else that we were actually trying to test does appear to be working and watertight for the most part. So I'm going to let this run a little bit, and at least as I monitor the leak up there, to make sure that there's no leaks elsewhere. And then coming soon in part 4, we'll be continuing the build, maybe get the motherboard installed along with the water cooling loop this time. That would be fun. This is probably the first time I've ever built a system with a water cooling loop that doesn't actually have a system installed, so that was kind of unique. Overall though, I'm happy that the radiators are fitting. I think the radiators and the fans look really nice in here. They're very serious, very business-like. Of course, we're not sticking with soft tubing for this. We're gonna go with hardline tubing. I have a confirmation from Corsair that they're gonna be providing me with fittings for this, which is really nice. I really like Corsair's new line of Hydro X fittings. I need to take some measurements still for the custom cable sleeving that's gonna be done by InSource Customs, so still a lot of work to be done on this build, but of course, I'm still looking for your feedback and suggestions. If you guys have anything to let me know that you would do, or things that could be done better, or just things that you're like, hey, I noticed this and maybe you could do this instead, please let me know in the comment section below. I will read them. I might not actually take your advice. That's up to my discretion, but for now, that is all for this build in the Singularity Computers Spectre 2.0 case with all the 2080 Ti's and the motherboard that's not installed and everything. Thank you so much for watching this video, guys. Hit the thumbs up button if you enjoyed it. More on this build coming very soon. We'll see you guys in the next one.